time, we'll call this November 13th, 2018 meeting of the Fayette County Area Plan Commission to order. Please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next order is roll call.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Ed Harrell.
Present.
Okay. Leota King. Leota called to inform me that she would not be here. Shirley Weiss, so far absent. Chad Frank, so far absent. Mr. Sudoff.
Here.
Okay. Ms. McCann.
Here.
Mrs. Seiler.
Here.
Okay. Mr. O'Neill, currently absent, as is Mr. Waterman. Staff. Raymond McDaniel, present. Beverly Rude, I believe this is again falls on one of the Bev's nights to work late, so I don't think Bev will be here. But she was kind enough to provide us with the minutes, though, from the last meeting. And Ms. Sanders.
Here.
Okay. At this time, we do not have a quorum. As our rules of procedure is, we allow 15 minutes for the quorum to come forward to happen. But at this time, as we have one of the, Mr. Nutty, a member of the city council, has come to attend the meeting, which you have no idea how much it's really appreciated, Dave. But if there's any kind of questions on everything that started this or anything specifically within the copies of the ordinance?
If I may.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So, I mean, if we can,
Yeah,
if there's anything I can enlighten you to with this, I'm more than happy to.
Well, you don't have enough time to tell me everything I don't understand. What I would ask is, you don't have to tell me the history of how we got to this point, because I do understand that. What I would want to know is the intent of the new ordinance, the content-based, which is what you're looking at, content-based sign, what is that? Maybe a couple examples.
Okay.
And then where do we go from here?
Okay.
If you would, please.
Okay. The first one is what was your first one, Dave?
Intent.
Intent. Okay. The overall intent really is to bring our ordinance into strict compliance with the Supreme Court decision of Reed Gilbert. And on its face, the whole thing is it ultimately flowed out of just portable temporary signs. They treated different classes of temporary signs differently. So the entire Supreme Court decision was you can't treat them differently, because they even had it doesn't matter whether it's what the speech is. So then the examples of for example, is typically some of the things that you had as maybe a good way to just give an idea is that these under question in the ordinance for Gilbert was that Arizona was that they had different classes of portable signs. They had temporary signs, I should say. The temporary sign that initiated it was for a church that did not have a home. Reed was the pastor for the church. So they would put out the signs to, this is where we're going to be at. They weren't even at the same place every week. So they're always changing. So always needed the temporary signs to tell people where to go. Now, they were treated with a time frame differently than other signs, such as political signs or going out of sale signs, pancake breakfast signs, things like those. They were all treated differently. And so they couldn't treat, and it wasn't because Reed was a church, but it's because they were treated differently than these other types of speech. The one in the memo that was there is that, for example, they had different sizes and setbacks for political signs, which were larger and closer to the road. They had other signs that were really no different in the effect. Even some signs that were the same size, they had a farther setback or they had a time frame. They had some signs that had no time frames. You had other signs which, even though there wasn't an endpoint to the, such as a special event, it didn't have a, these had a limitation on sign. So the idea was that they all had to be treated the same. Example around here, or a good example, were the political signs. Could be contractor signs, could be the I Stand With Israel signs, the anti-abortion signs, or the people against abortion, anybody along those lines. All of these people still have to be, you can't regulate them based on who they are or what someone is saying. So all you can do is that, okay, you have a temporary sign of, say, such and such a size. Well, they can have to be set back so far from the street, and then there's a time frame. Then you get to a certain size if it's larger. So it might be say a visual hazard on people trying to look around intersections. Well, then it comes in time if it's going to be taller, then you need to set back farther from the street. And the way the Supreme Court decision was written, it doesn't apply just to the temporary signs, it applies to all signs. So, which is why that you have, they all have to be, okay, maximum height of X feet. Okay, anything that's, the setback has to be so far back, which is why there's a provision in there under 3 feet, it can be closer to the road, but if there's a sign frame, it's either 15 or 20 feet back from the edge of the road. Because that's to give you room to look around so it isn't blocking views of traffic. And so the primary, one of the primary factors behind this thing you're trying to achieve really is there's a public safety aspect of what you're doing with the signs. And it's also written in a way to allow people to be flexible for how they design their sign programs. Now, there's one actual main advertising sign for a business, or whether it's a church or whether it's a business with the full height sign. But if you have second entrances, you can have a smaller secondary sign to tell someone that this is where you're at, say on the next street. Okay, it still allows you to have entrance signs, right at the edge of the street, saying you're in and out arrows, and so those are actually allowed, but they're not considered part of the whole sign program because those are informational and safety type signs. You're looking at the size of the signs on the building, the height of the sign, the square footage of the sign, and so you're trying to treat everybody the same.
And when you say sign and banners are still a sign?
Yeah, signs and banners are still
banner.
signs, but if they're used temporarily, that's where there's the provision in there with the banners of.
There's some examples of signs that might let you
Yep.
help.
Yep. And there's one of them right here. I had a couple people call to complain about because where it was at, they had difficulty safely seeing on on Indiana 1. So I do need to give them a talk. And these ones you see on the post right here, these ones are, those are what's called snipe signs. And really they're not permitted under the current ordinance nor this one. Actually, they shouldn't be permitted, period, because you're trespassing when you're posting a sign on someone else's property. But, it's who's going to send someone out there to take them down. It's probably not as much of an issue for some of the phone companies and so on as were in the past. But at one time when they had when they had to use the shoes, the spikes, well, they would hit them, they would slip and slide. They would lose their footing and then slide, so it was a hazard to them. So those are really theirs and they shouldn't be allowed. But like I said, the utility company could take them down. Anybody who's right away within their end, whether it's the city of Connersville, the state of Indiana, or the county highway, or the Fayette County, can remove them. But it's primarily because of the safety aspect. Then, like I said, that one banner right there, I do need to speak. Yeah, I do need to speak with them about that, to have them move the post and then set it back farther from the road because of the people complaining about it, having difficulty seeing. and one person who's, I do know, is you also know her, is she called in because her daughter had some problems, looking around it, so she's afraid for the safety of her daughter. And
safer
and then you have banners that are on buildings,
Yeah.
such as grand opening. Well, what you allow is for the banners on the buildings, those temporary signs, you allow the same size as the actual, that you would allow for the regular permanent sign, that type of thing.
Let me see that.
On building signage.
On building
Yeah,
signs,
and-
yes.
And as our discussion before the meeting, I did read most of the material, which was lengthy, and understood most of the material. And since the city council will have to
Yep.
vote on an ordinance about this, I wanted to get as much information as possible since I didn't fully understand all of it.
Yep.
And reading as I do, I know it's going to go by what the Supreme Court
Yep.
ruling was.
Yep.
Understanding that what I read was some things still are treated differently, but
Yep.
it's
Yep.
it's
But the main one,
considered-
the main one is just not speech,
Right,
speech and speakers are treated differently.
right.
Yeah, so you can,
And that's why I got,
Yeah.
I have photos of, I try to make photos of different types of signs. So that would add to the conversation, so,
and for example, is okay, you probably then noticed in there's the reference within say temporary signs within a X period of time after the event is over. They need to be removed. And that's in there to apply to things such as, after the political campaign season is over, boom, you can, you got about a week to remove them. Okay, your real estate property is sold, well, you gotta remove them within that period of time. And really, one of the problems people complained about is there's a couple contractors in particular placing their little sticks in the ground all over town, which aren't allowed under the current ordinance, and are still not allowed under this.
I do know there are contractors, while they're working at a location,
Exactly.
put a sign out
So
front.
which is why after the work is done, it has to be removed.
Okay.
Which is why if something, after an event or a period of time, that's why it requires it to be removed in a certain period of time.
Will you allow, with this being brand new to a lot of people and somewhat difficult to understand by general public,
Easier than the last one to
yeah,
understand.
will there be a period of grace time to get an understanding and you can say, this isn't allowed on the new ordinance,
yeah.
but
Absolutely.
for the first 6 months of the year or whatever.
It's that's what you always do is when something's new right there, you
Okay.
always give someone a heads up.
Okay.
And unless it's a safety thing, I do the same thing when there's been some tweaks to the building code.
Well, I was gonna say my interpretation of it was deal with the safety issues first by the end of the year.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other things,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because that's always your priority with the things are public safety, especially when you're severely limited with a lot of things as far as your.
You're welcome to these if you want.
Oh, okay. Oh, sure. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
The time and resources is that you really have to focus in on the things with public safety. 'Cause that's the big one right there.
I have other photos, but I think they're more of permanent signs.
Yep.
Also directional signs as in enter, exit,
Yep.
that kind of things, or which aren't addressed in the same manner as what I'm questioning.
Yep.
Because we're really interested in the temporary signs, right?
Yep.
So,
That's what
and
drove everything.
temporary
Yeah.
is a broad term. As I mentioned, there are some of those four-legged temporary marquee type signs
Yep.
that's been in the same location for 3 years. So.
Well, if what you'll look at is, and it's some of the same language as in the current code, but it's
It'd be nice to get rid of, when they have garden sales, get rid of them,
yeah.
instead of leaving them up and up and up.
Yep, absolutely.
They
And for
ought to be
example,
limited time.
for example, those.
And I think it does under the
Yeah,
ordinance.
including the current one.
Yeah.
So for example, is they still have a bunch, people leave their yard sale signs out after the yard sale is, I mean, if the city street department's instructed to remove them when they're don't want you to flunk, they can remove them. Things like that. But, okay, I just think there's the yard sale signs, yeah, it's the, okay, where was I going?
Well, we were just talking about temporary signs and comparing which and
Oh, yeah,
what.
yeah.
and
Well-
Some are on their actual property, some are in right-of-ways, some are actually nailed to a pole,
Yep.
so,
Yeah,
which are not legal anyways.
yeah, and the thing with the changes within the actual height and then the distance of the smaller ones from the road was something that your fellow council member, Mr. Frank, had some questions about. So that was loosened just a little bit at his request, and it was based on actual. It was a practical on his part, his concern over that. But it's the portable signs. Well, what it led into was there's also an opportunity to eliminate as much as possible some of the different formulas that we had. Because a lot of things, such as your maximum sign program, there's this, the multiple optional formulas. Okay, it's given a maximum size of, your height was based on your length of the road frontage, so that was just changed. There's just the actual maximum height.
Good
So it's an
idea.
attempt to simplify things by minimizing the use of formulas.
Good idea.
And I think one of the things also in particular, I wasn't sure about the matrix form. And as Mr. Crawford had been responsible also for enforcing the zoning code, he appreciated the matrix. For him, it made the sign regulations a lot, made it easier for him to understand where things were, what the rules were, rather than having to dig through the pros.
Well, I appreciate the work that you and the others have done. Just put something in a layman's terms so you can somewhat understand it. Even though there's still a lot of legalese that's why the words of content-based threw me. I said, well, everything has content to it, so
Yeah.
what are you talking about there? So
Well,
have a better
which is where it comes in is the actual term they use is content neutral. So the basic one
so a
is,
blank sign is okay.
well, it's like,
To me, that's neutral.
well, that's wise. When someone wants to present you with, say, their plans for their sign, it's like, I don't care what's on the sign. I can't regulate what's on the sign. I just need to know the dimensions.
Location, dimensions, length of time, that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Those are all the things that you have to concern yourself with. So, as the way the Supreme Court decision was that if you have to look at the sign to know, if you haven't to see what's on the sign, to know how you have to deal with the sign, regulate the sign, it's a First Amendment case. And then the big problem with that, what they call strict scrutiny, is that then the entire burden then falls. So, for example, say you're someone who's challenging a certain sign regulation because you didn't get to put in what you wanted to as far as the sign goes. Well, say if you challenge it, and you have to read it to see how it's actually to interpret. So once you actually read it to interpret it, is that so that's the first test that say a judge would go to. It's like, okay, boom. Well, we read this regulation. Well, you have to know what's on the sign in order to know how to regulate it. So therefore, it's legitimately a First Amendment problem. So that's where it goes into the strict scrutiny. And the strict scrutiny then falls on the actual legal jurisdiction.
Oh, you like that?
So the burden is now on the legal jurisdiction to demonstrate that the rules that you have are
Oh, yeah.
the absolute minimum to achieve the public purpose, which is public safety.
When you were talking about not limiting the content, I hope you're not saying that any language on the signs is fair game.
Well, that goes to the one about the, which Supreme Court.
Because there's
case-
some things could be put on a sign that I think everyone would.
Yeah, well, that
Would
gets into the
disagree
one
with.
with the, what was the Supreme Court case in it with the, as far as, with the language is the, but but I know it when I see it. But, yeah, then it's just, you just have to be real careful with it, but, yeah, all kinds of different profanities now.
Right,
Things like
exactly,
that.
that's what I'm going for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. things
Someone
like
could
that.
be for or against something, but use profanity in order to,
It's one of those, I think that comes under, if I'm not mistaken, kind of like you know it when you see it.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of, which isn't a great level of scrutiny, but
Yeah, I forget what Supreme Court justice it was, but that's what.
that's pretty much what it
just
is.
was.
It's kind of like you know it when you see it when it
Yeah.
comes to profanity.
because there is language
Yeah,
I don't
pornography.
use that I know some people, it's their normal conversations.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's where it's, well, and a good example of where, okay, you know when they had the Jesus the Answer crosses that people were sticking in the city right away all over town. I couldn't help but think that, well, now how, there is a great everybody shrug of the shoulders. Now, what I couldn't help but imagine is that now, if someone right next to it would have put in, there's no God but Allah next to it, people would have been going crazy. But you know what? You can't treat the two differently, because that's an example of.
But it's still signage,
Yeah,
right?
and that's an example of it's the same type of speech which you can't regulate. But this is a good example of the part in there not discriminate against speakers. You can't treat speakers differently either. Not only the speech, but the speakers.
But
So
the
I think-
size and where it's located, you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you were to go through and, say, insist on pulling up the "There's no God but Allah" signs, you had to do the same thing with the Jesus Saves crosses.
Sure.
But in the meantime, is you have any other questions before it's on your next agenda?
Oh, yeah.
So feel free to stop by if you have more questions.
Well, I know how to get a hold of you, I know how to get a hold of other people on the
Yep.
board, so.
Yep.
But I think that certainly helps me, and I think the questions I have assist the public in understanding also.
Yeah, but, because I think I also got a copy to David, but in the meantime, is if you could, make sure David has a copy that he's seen also. David Butch, city attorney, so that David has a chance to go ahead and look at it too.
Appreciate it.
Because he may see something as an attorney that, I didn't, some things that John Baker might not have seen, or Colin or Ann, or myself may have missed, or, questions otherwise.
My biggest assessment of it is, and it's like you said, there's a lot of legalese in it, but in reading over it, I mean, the biggest thing is safety is going to trump anything. And then when it comes to obscene or whatever, it's kind of like a you know it when you see it type
Yeah.
thing, which it isn't very helpful because, signs might go up and you don't realize until you see it. But honestly, I think that was my biggest assessment is, what does this all mean? It means we'll know it when we see it that, that's going to violate the Supreme Court ruling.
Yeah.
So
And,
unfortunately, they're usually vague like that.
Yes.
I mean,
And after that, we're looking at size, setback,
Right.
length of time displayed, and
yes.
that
okay.
kind of
Now,
stuff.
for example, as you're referring to with the profanity type thing, or the pornographic, or that actually it had to do with pornography, but I know it when I see it. But would be that now, if there is a problem with something like this, I think the city and the county, they would really, to deal with something like that, it probably behooves, say, the local governments then to contact an attorney that's a First Amendment specialist on these things, because otherwise you can get waded into something. Because around the same time as because there's a session on
We're
the,
gonna have to have corn.
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, we do. And so there's another one is where, the other one is that, that communities have to be careful about how they regulate adult industry. All aspects, or it's the bookshops, anything else, because Supreme Court cases have decisions have found that it's you can have other rules in place, but basically exotic dancers, strippers, whatever you want to call them, it's a protected form of speech.
No, I just moved back to town, but I don't think that's a big industry here.
No, no, no.
Okay.
No, no,
I'm
it
just,
really
you
isn't.
know,
No, so
But I appreciate
when
the
other
work
communities
that
have gotten
I need to talk
into
to
it is
Sure.
they've gotten themselves in big problems.
during
yeah.
the meeting.
Bill,
Yes,
excuse me,
You wanna say
quick
what we
question.
need to-
When this
Towns
gets,
advice.
2 minutes.
when this
2 minutes.
makes it through the process and is ultimately approved, will this allow the, like the other city enforcer or county enforcer that does other things, yards and what have
Yeah.
you, can they use then this to
they
enforce?
absolutely can. The city has the authority because the zoning code is part of the city code. So I actually specifically put into with the signed regulations the last time and then this time, there's actually a clause in there that basically the city has the authority to, particularly as it goes with the junk signs and things like
Okay.
that, has the authority to enforce. The city has the authority to enforce any part of the zoning code because it's part of the city code.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
it is a city ordinance, but what about, I know she's not only on the area planning, but she's also currently on the county council. So how does it affect outside the city? Or
Okay.
does it?
Well, this
I know
was-
this is city
Well,
ordinance.
okay, well, this is an ordinance for both the city and the county.
Okay.
Being an area plan commission. So it's always fortunate that the ordinance, since a lot of these things affect primarily the city, is in the past, the commissioners have had a history of saying, well, let's wait to see what the city's gonna do with it, because it primarily affects them. So they wanna, as much as possible, have the exact same ordinance adopted. So so, like I said, the city, the city code enforcer does have the authority to enforce in the city limits.
Thank you,
Matter of fact, all parts of the zoning code if they so desire.
Thank you.
thank you.
I appreciate it, Tom.
Okay, hey, thank you for asking the questions, Dave, I appreciate that.
Okay,
I don't
so
get as much of that at the people as I'd like to. It helps me.
we should note that, thank you Shirley for being here tonight, and we do now have a quorum.
I apologize for running behind. I had
Yeah.
a couple of other phone calls that had to,
We're glad you're here. We do have a quorum, and so we can
Minutes,
get back to our agenda.
regularly scheduled program. Okay.
Is approval of minutes. You should have a copy of the minutes from the October meeting in front of you. Is
I'll
there-
make a motion. that we pass.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay, motion, thank you. Motion by Shirley the second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next item is public hearings. I think we've,
Well, we talked about it, but while waiting for the quorum to show up.
yeah,
But
Is there any-
it wasn't part of the public hearing.
I understand.
So, yeah, so it's kind of just a. little
So
bit-
now we are officially
Yeah, gavel in the public hearing.
open for public hearing.
No additional comments.
Any other members of the board? Anything you'd like me to further enlighten you upon, other than the meaning of life? 42.
Hearing none. We'll close the public hearing. Is there any questions from the commission further on this ordinance? So now we can either send a favorable recommendation to the city council and the county commissioners, or an unfavorable, or a no recommendation.
Now, bear in mind, since we have a quorum, that whatever the motion is, has to be unanimous.
Yeah, since there's only 5 of us.
And I'm in favor that we do, well, at the beginning, what we said was going on there. What David brought up so the city will know what's going on.
Yep. Yep, okay, so you're making a motion to, approve it as presented?
Yes,
The ordinance is presented?
Favorable.
favorable of it.
And I would like to second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for a favorable recommendation to the council, city council, and the commissioners. Are there any questions on the motion? We'll do a roll call vote.
Okay. Mr. Harrell,
Yes.
Ms. Wise,
Yes.
Mr. Sudoff,
Yes.
Ms. McCann,
Yes.
Ms. Seiler.
Yes.
Okay, and, all right. And it carries by a 5-0 vote. Thank you.
So we have passed a favorable recommendation to forward.
2 years of work, finally.
Yeah.
And we thank you for
Yeah,
that
yeah.
diligent work. It's not an easy thing to,
Well, I think it's kind of helpful in that, that we didn't have a mad rush into it. Because with just being the only person, I had a lot of ebbs and flows to my time to work on this. So I think that gave time to not run into a panic situation with this. And then gave me a little bit more time here and there to think about things. Think about potential pitfalls. And so I really appreciate this. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, next item is the director's report. You have a copy of that in front of you. We don't have Jason here.
Well, we don't have Bev either, so I'm the standby secretary.
Do you have a motion on this?
I'll move to approve the director's report
Thank you.
from November, I guess, from October's.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and second to approve the October director's report. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Next up is adjournment.
I make a we adjourn
Motion
the
to
meeting.
adjourn, is there a second?
I'll second that.
And we have a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Okay.
Thank you, and the meeting is adjourned.
Okay.